All right. Hello, everyone. We are indeed going to start with our part three. We're going to focus our conversation on the music of Tristan Murray. And again, like I said, he's going to have a different kind of spin on spectralism, but also have a number of things that he shares in common with Grisey. So to kick us off, Tristan Murray is indeed still alive, which is quite fortunate. He has a he was born 1 year later than Grisey, and has a lot of commonalities in terms of his story, and that has to do a lot with geographic location. Again, born in 1947. He became a student of Messiaen at the Paris Conservatory in 1967, and by the time 1971 rolls around, he receives the Rome Prize, which is a huge deal. And those 2 years that he spent in Rome were incredibly formative in terms of his development of music. And we're going to talk about his works kind of alongside that, at least a little bit, in addition to some of his more contemporary works as a way of getting a good survey of the artist in general, although he is still obviously continuing to compose. So in 1973, much like Grisey, he founded an ensemble, and this ensemble was a way to engage with experimentation of electroacoustic composition very specifically, later in the 1980s ended up having quite an interest in computer technology and how it relates to acoustics, again, very similarly to Grisey's story. He developed a number of important, assisted composition programs when it came to electroacoustic composition that happened in 1997, and alongside of that, he was at Columbia University during that time, giving a number of master classes around the world. He's had an incredibly long-standing relationship with the history and trajectory of music history, which we find very, very, very interesting. Certainly as influential as Grisey was, and the two of them really created the backbone of what we consider to be spectralism. So the idea, again, is that we're going to understand a little bit of the artist through an interview that the artist is indeed giving, in addition to getting a perspective of their body of works through 3 different samplings, and then hopefully talking a little bit about some of the major interests and inspirations that Murray had. So let's start with an interview of him to give us an insight into him as an artist. So let me go back to our presentation. This one's nice. I'm going to go through a few of these questions.
Oui, on me dit souvent que mes titres sont poétiques, imagés, etc. Alors moi d'abord je pense qu'un titre c'est important parce que c'est une sorte de guide pour l'écoute. Mais parfois il y a plus que ça. Par exemple dans les pièces pour piano dont nous allons parler, le titre c'est plus qu'un titre, c'est une sorte de programme pour la pièce. Donc pour moi il y a vraiment une sorte de, oui, on peut dire un sujet ou une idée directrice qui va conditionner la structure de la pièce et également bien sûr le contenu, le matériau, les couleurs, les sentiments qui seront à l'œuvre dans la pièce. Alors en ce qui concerne le piano, euh, je dois dire que je trouve qu'il y a eu une sorte d'oubli au cours du XXe siècle. Au XIXe siècle et au début du XXe siècle, il y a eu une sorte d'essor incroyable de la littérature pour piano, avec des grands compositeurs, comme bien sûr Liszt, qui est vraiment le grand précurseur, et on pourrait dire qu'il a presque tout inventé. Et puis d'autres, bien sûr, qui ont suivi. Bon, je pense naturellement à Debussy, mais aussi des compositeurs comme Scriabine, bon, Ravel, bien sûr, Albéniz également. Donc tous ces compositeurs ont développé en dehors même de la question purement musicale, des techniques d'écriture pour le piano tout à fait extraordinaires. Et on a un peu oublié ça au cours du XXe siècle, il y a une sorte de cassure. Donc j'essaie de renouer avec cette période-là, pas au niveau stylistique ou esthétique, mais en tout cas au niveau des possibilités du piano, de la façon dont le piano peut être écrit, tout simplement les doigtés, par exemple, les doigtés de Liszt, si on regarde ce qu'on appelle les urtextes, les partitions originales, sont tout à fait intéressants et ça ouvre des horizons. Et puis bien sûr, la façon dont ces compositeurs, ceux qu'on a cités, utilisent le piano, la résonance du piano de manière tout à fait spéciale. Donc voilà la façon dont j'essaie de renouer le fil avec cette tradition, tout en faisant bien sûr ma propre musique. Il ne s'agit pas du tout d'une démarche nostalgique. Alors bien sûr, ces compositeurs du passé, comme je le disais, nous montrent des modèles en fait. Ça peut être des modèles de structure musicale, des modèles de technique instrumentale. Euh, il y a des éléments qui peuvent être source d'idées, bon, d'inspiration comme l'on peut dire, mais aussi plus précisément d'un travail d'écriture particulier pour le piano. Par exemple, dans le disque, il y a en fait plusieurs pièces qui se réfèrent d'une manière plus ou moins claire à des œuvres soit de Liszt, soit de Debussy. Je pense que la référence la plus claire, c'est à Debussy, une pièce qui s'appelle Cailloux dans l'eau, qui fait référence au reflet dans l'eau de Debussy. La référence est d'autant plus claire que la pièce avait été écrite à l'occasion de l'année Debussy, il y a, je crois, maintenant 3 ans. Et j'ai gardé d'un reflet dans l'eau, enfin j'ai analysé la pièce, j'en ai gardé une partie de la structure en tant que modèle, puis également certains mouvements mélodiques, certains types d'écriture pour le piano, certains types de virtuosité pour le piano. Mais la pièce qui résulte, c'est totalement ma musique, même si elle évoque Debussy, sans pour autant faire aucune citation de la musique de Debussy.
So we'll stop it here because I know that our time is short. I think he's a well-spoken individual. And while we're not going to talk about Debussy as a point of inspiration, I think it's really interesting that he's talking about the expression of the musical canon as it relates to piano literature, and very specifically the idea that these composers that he's talking about, most notably Debussy, is really actively thinking about the resonance of the piano. And the piano as a resonating body. And that kind of sentimentality and those kinds of um, objectives when it comes to music composition is going to be really important to the spectral composers. This idea of what is inherent in the acoustics and the resonance of a particular instrument, and how are you going to use that as a compositional constraint or consideration. So we're going to look at survey his works through 3 different pieces. 2 of them, again, thinking about like the lineage of spectral music. This is the first sort of sampling that we're going to have is from 1979. When the first official label of spectral music was given to the spectralists. we're going to follow with a piece, a handful of years later, or four years later, Disintegrations, and then a long form piece that kind of exhibits Tristan Murray's late style, and hopefully at the very end talk about Olivier Messiaen, who was incredibly important both to Grisey and Tristan Murray. Um, so this piece from 1979, we are going to encounter a number of pieces for full orchestra, mostly because the full orchestra is going to have a complex array of timbres in order to play around with, to use compositionally. And uh, this work is, and these notes are taken from Tristan Murray's website specifically, are about creating the sum of difference tones created by ring modulated ones. And this is the bread and butter of the harmonic material that's happening in this work. So it's a interesting split between an interest in both harmony, but timbre and harmony and timbre together. Um, and what I really love about this specifically is, um, well, you're going to hear a lot of similarities to what we've already covered, but also a number of differences. sure you noticed that the person at the keyboard is, of course, Tristan Murray, which is very interesting. I love it when the composer is also engaged in the actual performance of their work. In this case, as you noticed, especially towards the end, the idea is that we're orchestrating out that soloist part, creating even a richer and more abstract expression of the overtone series of a number of those different moments. So a kind of music that's 100% focused on timbre and timbre as it relates to harmonic movement, the idea of melody and accompaniment completely out of our scope of interest for the spectralists. However, the music is incredibly colorful and interesting to listen to, has a really strong focus again on just one particular element of music and the idea of timbre and timbral transformation. The other one that you could definitely argue that is apparent is harmony, but really harmony as it relates to timbral transformation as well. So let's take a peek at what's happening, a couple years down the road in 82 to 83. Um, so this is a piece in which electronics play a huge role, and all of the computer-generated sounds that are happening here are actually modeled on real instrument sounds. So the computer doesn't attempt any direct simulation of the instruments that are concerned within the piece, but instead they are used as the sort of point in which we are engaging with the electronics. So that's very interesting in terms of using an acoustic background for the electronic medium as a way of like blending the two together quite seamlessly. Um, so there's a lot of, again, gradual transformation of timbre that's happening here as being our huge focus. It's a clear, a sort of ever evolving kind of texture of sounds, and it's going to hold a lot of similarities to what we just listened to, but have a different kind of interest behind it as well when it's concerned with the electronics. a lot of really dense colors. And the idea, again, here, much like the last piece that we listened to, is that we're really going to be concerned with the idea of gradual timbral transformation and the idea that we're engaged with the sound of the sound and all of the really rich, very vibrant overtone content and microtonal content of a particular sound and kind of orchestrating it out. Now, this is also a little different though, in as much as we definitely hear the strong electronic sound that was really pervasive in music from the 1980s. So a departure from what we just listened to in terms of the kinds of sounds that we're engaged with. It's hard to kind of place my finger on, but it definitely does sound like electronic music that was written in the 1980s. Those early synthesized sounds that are really coming to the forefront and being mixed with an acoustic group to create these really rich gradual timbral transformations. It's worth looking at one other piece. In this case, it's going to be something from the later part of MURAIL's body of works that we've been concerned with, but a longer one, and indeed a cycle that exists for 8 musicians. And it's a work that is supposed to be autobiographical, which this is one of the reasons why I'm giving it some time during this presentation, is like these are all pieces that were written inspired by a particular place or a experience with art, but they are kind of artistic transformations of an almost like a time capsule, if you will, and something that has worked on during this stretch of time, being a little 12 years. That's an interesting musical catalog of his experience. So there's a small little bit of him doing an interview about the work, or at least a selection of it, and then we're going to play a small sample.
Portugal is the name of means old maps for navigation in the medieval times, at a time where they didn't have compasses, and they just followed the coastline in order to get cues as to where they were. But in fact, for me, it's some kind of a symbol for voyage, for journeys in strange countries. This cycle of pieces for me is like a journey, an inner journey, let's say. And all the pieces refer to something that either I've been, where I've been, a place where I've been, or something I was really interested with. At the moment there are 6 pieces, including the 2 pieces that were premiering in Amsterdam that have been written. And I intend to, well, I'm not sure now, but 10, maybe 12 pieces total.
Does it also have something to do with your birthplace, Le Havre, which is also a port?
Well, one of the pieces, in fact, the piece that you are premiering, the Dernière Nouvelle du Vent d'Ouest, Last News from the West Wind, has to do with not necessarily with Le Havre, but the West Wind, which blows all the time on Le Havre, as I suppose it does also in Amsterdam. The non-musical world is very important because it provides, you said inspiration, I would rather say openings or models for shapes, for timing, for events. And in fact, if you look at the music of the past, lots of things are shaped like waves. In fact, in those pieces of the Portulan cycle, I try to experiment new things, especially new forms. Well, I mean, when you are writing for small ensembles, it's easy to do slight modifications because you collaborate with the musicians, with the interprets of the music. And La Chambre des Cartes is supposed to be the first piece in the cycle. Mm-hmm. Because it's really about the maps, so about the Portulan idea.
Where does the pulse come from?
I thought of the submarine of Captain Nemo, where I suppose there is a room with lots of maps, you know, and I was thinking of the machines behind there. It's very amusing because we have the Nemo Museum just right there, yes.
So I think that it's really telling that, you know, that there's all of this extra musical detail that is involved within, you know, these very abstract pieces that we're listening to, and that they're based not in, you know, things that are abstract necessarily. They're sort of rooted in things that are quite real, quite of the everyday, and that there is a lot of inspiration that comes from non-musical events for composers. And so I think one of the things that I've mentioned is that it's really important to not really consider music as being created inside of this bubble that a lot of musicologists potentially it's not so much that it's something that they actively try to do, but I think it's something that when you're considering the word count of a particular article or a selection of a paper or something like that, that, you know, sometimes that we don't really feel that it's relevant to mention the everyday life of what is creating this composition in the first place. And you know, Tristan Murray is inspired by the places that he goes and invites these experiences of travel into his larger musical settings. And I think that's really interesting and something that we should pay attention to. We heard a little bit of the piece that he was talking about within this interview, but I think it would be nice to also just take a couple minutes to listen to a selection of it a little bit more specifically. So here I am encountering a lot of interesting division between the kind of postmodern school of composers and its influence on the spectralist, but also strong instances of just straight spectralism, especially with that natural glissando that's happening with the horn part, this woo, and it being further flavored by other sonorities that are placed within the mix. It feels very much within the spectral landscape of being like a sound initiating the development of another sound, or a resonance leading to the investigation of a sound, in addition to these much more serialist techniques that are kind of intermixed within it. As a point of wrapping up our discussion of Tristan Murail, I do want to talk about an influence for him, both compositionally and also for Grousset, and that would be Olivier Messiaen. And I really am excited to present on his music, and our time with him will be brief, but he's a composer who I've had the pleasure of getting to conduct, and he was incredibly charismatic, a fantastic and phenomenal teacher. I want to kind of look at him and him as an educator very, very quickly, and then play a couple of minutes of a work of his from 1947, which it translates from the canyons to the stars, a orchestral work, which I think you'll understand why he was such an influence on the spectral composers. This is something for you to revisit on your own time if you wish, if you find Olivier Messiaen to be particularly interesting. But I think seeing him in action and seeing him teach very gives quick color to him as a portrait.
Chers administrés, asseyez-vous, je vous prie. Voilà, ce matin, je vous ai apporté Péléas et Mélisande. Alors, voulez-vous me dire ce qui vous frappe dans ce passage? Il y a deux choses qui me frappent tout de suite. Il y a deux mots importants. Loin. Merci, il y a le mot loin. Mélisande dit, je ne suis pas d'ici, je ne suis pas né là, je suis né loin. Loin, et elle le répète plusieurs fois, loin, c'est-à-dire que plus elle le répète, plus on s'éloigne, et plus on sent qu'elle n'appartient pas à notre planète, qu'elle est d'un autre monde, qu'elle est située sur un autre plan. Mais aussitôt, Golo enchaîne et il nous dit, qu'est-ce qui brille ainsi au fond de l'eau? Est-ce que ça vous frappe pas, cette phrase? Qu'est-ce qu'il y a d'extraordinaire dans cette phrase? Les reflets dans l'eau, c'est le titre d'une de ses pièces.
Poisson d'or.
Poisson d'eau, mais enfin, tout Bussy, ce sont des choses sur l'eau et sur des choses qui brillent. Eh bien, je vais vous le jouer maintenant. Et puis, je vais aussi vous poser des questions. Où êtes-vous né? Alors, Golo lui dit, d'où êtes-vous né? Vous m'excusez, je chante très mal, mais ça n'a pas d'importance, j'ai une voix de compositeur, il faut bien. Elle répond, loin d'ici, loin, loin. Qu'est-ce qui brille ainsi? Qu'est-ce qui brille ainsi au fond de l'eau? Je vous joue les deux, voilà la gamme partante. Et voilà la seconde présentation. Beaucoup plus chaude. Vous êtes d'accord, la première est plus froide, la seconde est plus chaude. Nous sommes d'accord sur ce point. Vous êtes d'accord pour un gris violet pour la première? Ils sont toujours très inquiets pour les couleurs.
Je suis daltonien.
Ceci, moi, me semble un orangé dans lequel il y a tout de même des pointes de bleu. De vert.
Ah oui.
Le bleu et le vert c'est froid, oui, mais c'est l'oranger qui domine.
Oui.
So I think it's perfect to have him talking about very specifically about color. And, to come full circle, he's also talking about Debussy. So I think that someone who is such a gifted educator who's actively talking about color and the amount of difference it makes within the scope of a composition is going to be a huge mover and shaker when it comes to creating the roots of the spectral movement. And like I said, Messiaen was particularly important not only to Tristan Murail, but also to Gerard Grisey, and to Sarayahu for that matter as well. I'll conclude this little bit by just having us listen to a little bit of Olivier Messiaen. Specifically his piece from 1947, again, giving us an idea about like the context of time. 47, 12 years or so later, we're going to start having the beginnings of spectralism. And so I think this is an interesting precursor to that discussion as he was again, an important person for both of these. I love this horn line that the whole thing kicks off with and that we've returned to right here. As you might have noticed, intermixed in this, you'll notice that there are notes, and these are actually transcription of bird song that were uh, either inspired by the narrative of the piece or directly related to the geographical location it's trying to cover. The reason I sort of take that back is potentially this is a Japanese bird. But Messiaen was a huge lover of bird song, definitely spent a lot of time thinking about nature and incorporating nature in his pieces. Exotic Birds is a work that I happen to have conducted, which is quite wonderful, very challenging, but a number of these um, gestures come back a lot of times within his compositions. You'll notice that a lot of everyone is acting a lot of time in rhythmic unison with one another. The idea that it's not one pitch, but a combination of pitches that's creating these rich sonorities with these rich overtones. And again, not a huge stone's throw to get to our two principal composers when talking about the spectral movement from that kind of an interest. So again, gifted teacher, really wonderful thinker, left an incredibly amazing body of works. And if you're not familiar with him or some of his compositions, I would definitely look him up. So for our fourth and final part, we will discuss the music of Sarajevo. And after that, I will talk to you about our next subjects that we will cover for the remainder of the semester. But I will see you in part 4 shortly.